All right, so let's finish up with this issue, a very controversial issue, a very complicated issue about which a lot more could be said. But let's just finish up about what virtue theory says about it. I think Hursthouse's article is interesting, and I believe it does help us to think about the issue. But as I said in the last lecture, I also think that it brings up a criticism of virtue theory and a criticism she doesn't really, as far as I can tell, consider at all, much less take as seriously as she should. And that charge is that virtue theory is narcissistic or solipsistic, or if you want to use less fancy words, just self centered in a weird and objectionable way. Think about this, right? I think I've already said this, but the issue comes back up, right? Think about what you would say if I were to say, well, why is it wrong to lie to your friends? And I just focused on what it said about my character. It's dishonest, it's selfish, it's unjust. All of that might be true. I think it is, right? Somebody who routinely lies to his friends to get money or whatever else, I think does have a bad character. But is that the main reason that it is wrong to lie to your friends? If you know, steal money is the wrong reason that it's unjust or stingy. That's really weird to say, right? The main reason it's wrong to lie to your friends, especially to lie to them to defraud them, is it hurts them, right? It takes their money, it makes them unhappy, it creates a sense of betrayal, it does something bad to them. Utilitarianism and Kantianism are in a very good spot to explain that, to take it on board, right? Utilitarianism can point to all the unhappiness people feel when they're taken advantage of, especially by those close to them. Kantianism can say, well, they're persons, you are not treating them as persons, you're using them as a mere means. Different accounts, but they both seem to me to put the focus where it should be, on the other person and the harm the action does to them. Virtue theory puts the focus, it seems to me, in exactly the wrong place, on you and your character. That might not be unimportant, but if you think it's the most important thing here, that seems a weird sort of self obsession. Well, how does this relate to abortion? Well, if you're not thinking about what it does to the fetus and what kind of being the fetus might be, that seems to me unacceptably self centered. And these questions about the moral status of the fetus that Hursthouse wants to brush aside, and whether we have a right to an abortion, or whether people have a right to an abortion, might be unavoidable, right? Whether I have a right to something is very important in deciding whether I've acted unjustly, right? If I do something and I don't have a right to it, and it hurts somebody else, that's usually a pretty good indication that it's unjust. And think about the moral status, right? This matters even just for the what you would say about character, right? Imagine two cases. In case one, somebody spends millions of dollars, their entire life savings, to save their beloved dachshund, Frank. If you were that person's kids, I think you could complain and say, look, I could go to college with that. I could put my kids through college. You know, Frank's cute, but he's just a dog, right? It does seem to me to indicate a vice to spend that amount of money on a dog when you could spend it helping other people, especially people close to you. On the other hand, if you spent millions to save the life of your child or even a complete stranger, not only would that not say anything bad about your character, it would probably say something really good. So why is that different? Because Frank's not a person and your child is, or a complete stranger is, right? This moral status of the thing in question has a lot to say about the virtue or vices of the action. And again, there's nothing wrong. It would say nothing bad about you or your character if you decided to put Frank to sleep because it's too much work to give him a good quality of life, right? If it's like, okay, I'm going to have to quit my job to take care of this dog. He needs X, Y, and Z every day, or he's not going to be happy. Sorry, Frank, we're going to give you a nice, quiet end, right? I would not blame anyone who did that because Frank is just a dog. If you put your grandfather to sleep for the same reasons, that he's a hassle, that he's expensive, I would blame you, right? And I choose grandfather deliberately. One of my grandfathers I didn't know very well, and I was pretty close to one of my grandmothers, and I liked the other grandmother. My other grandfather was just a mean bastard, right? I don't have very many fond memories of him. Nonetheless, I don't think it would say, you know, even though he was not a nice man by any account, I think it would be very wrong just to put him to sleep. Not wrong, maybe not to visit him, but, even bad grandfathers you can't just put to sleep, right? Why? Because they are persons. So I think that Hursthouse cannot dodge this question of whether the fetus is a person, even if she just wants to think about the morality of abortion. She needs to take that question up. And maybe she doesn't want to give a Kantian account. There are so many accounts of personhood. It is a wildly complex issue. I have mostly avoided it. But whether or not the fetus is a person is going to say a lot about not just the morality of an abortion, but about the character of people who choose to do it or don't. I don't think Hursthouse can avoid that. And if her focus on virtue theory leads us to neglect that question, then I think not only is virtue theory not a helpful way to think about this, it's a step in the wrong direction. So Hursthouse's article is interesting, but I think in this way that she doesn't admit this question that maybe virtue theory leads us to focus too much in a very self-centered way about our own character. I think maybe we see that with her article. I don't know. To me, she handles some problems and a bigger one pops up in doing so. All right. Anyway, that's the last I'll say about the issue of abortion. Honestly, the last I'll say about anything for the class, since this is our last lecture.